Hi, this is Carl Alvarez from the Inside Metal movie documentary series that Bob directed and Joe Floyd and I produced and Warren Coyle executive produced. So when we were doing the movie, one of the things we wanted to do is a special devotion to all the people who have passed on. This is something we all love the idea, but considering time constraints, we couldn't get it done in time to turn into the movie. So we shelved it. But since Bob has passed, I wanted to resurrect the idea and do a special dedication to Bob. So, Bob arrives in heaven. And heaven is the Sunset Strip. And the entrance to heaven is the Rainbow Bar Grill. And that's the entrance to heaven. Bob walks up, and the first person he sees is Mike Henry, his old friend from August Red Moon in Eden. He's checking IDs at the door. Bob, people have been waiting for you. This is a big party going just for you inside, so come on in. So Bob walks in. First person he sees is Mario Magdaleri from the Rainbow. Elmer Valentine, co-owner of the Roxy and the Whiskey. Bill Gazzari. Kim Fowley. And we have Sandy West, the drummer of the Runaways. She's the hostess for Bob of the night, and she's gonna escort Bob in wherever Bob wants to sit, or Bob wants to wander around. It's Bob's night. He can do whatever he wants. So, if you ever been to the Rainbow, it's a big U-shaped, and there's the booths that are there, and this U-shaped, and there's quite a few people that are seated. Now, the first booth, we got Steve Gaines and Ronnie Van Zant from Lynyrd Skynyrd, Leslie West from Mountain, Ken Hensley from Uriah Heep, and we also have Dusty Hill from ZZ Top. The next booth, Rory Gallagher, Mick Ronson from David Bowie's band, Tommy Bolin from Deep Purple, and Mark Bolin from T-Rex, Paul Kozoff from Free, and Steve Marriott from Humble Pie. The far booth, the back booth, Eddie Van Halen, Ronnie Montrose, Randy Rhoads, Gary Moore, and Bernie Torme. On the right side of the room, in the back booth, we got Martin Hooker from the Great Music for Nations label, Bob Muldowney from Kick-Ass Monthly Fanzine, Malcolm Dome from Kerrang Magazine, John and Marsha Zazula from Megaforce Records. Now the next booth's over. We got two booths, all drummers. The first booth we have AJ Pirro, Twisted Sister, Munetaka Higuchi from Loudness, Randy Castillo from Ozzy's band, Lee Kerslake from the original Blizzard of Oz and Uriah Heep, Cozy Powell, John Bonham. Who else is assembled there? Neil Peart, Clive Burr from Iron Maiden, and Dave Holland from Judas Priest. Now, wait a second. There's some drummers that just came down. They heard Bob just arrived, and they wanted to see Bob. And there are also two drummers, Nick Menza and Gar Samuelson from Megadeth. And the next booth over, Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, Pete Way and Paul Chapman from UFO, Jimmy Bain from Rainbow and Dio, Bon Scott and Malcolm Young from AC/DC. Now, there's booths that are in the middle. Got a couple groups of people. First booth, Ray Gillen from Black Sabbath and Badlands, Robin Crosby from Rat, Mick Zane from Malice, Lauren Black from Great White, Willie Bass from Black Sheep, and Dave Brown from Sound Barrier. And the booth that's closest to the fireplace, we got a great group of people, three people especially, Kevin DeBro and Frankie Bonelli from Quiet Riot, seated next to Lizzie Gray from London. Wow, so that's the dining area. Now, on the other side of the fireplace, there's the bar area, and there's a great group of people that are assembled waiting for Bob. Dave Pritchard from Armored Saint, Danny Anaya, drummer from Abattoir, Rick Merrick, drummer from Heretic, Robbie Settles, drummer from Bitch, Gina Zamparelli, the great concert promoter. Alex Nelson and Tony Machuzak, guitarist from Lizzie Borden. Second group of people, Engo from Halloween, drummer from Halloween. Chris Oliva, guitarist of Sabotage. Steve Grimmett, the singer of Grim Reaper. And Mike Howell and David Wayne from Metal Church. We got two guys assembled at the far end of the bar. That's Cliff Burton and Timmy Hansen from Merciful Fate. They're talking Metallica and Merciful Fate and bass. They're off doing their thing. The bartender of all people is Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie says to Bob, whatever you want, it's an open bar, I'll pour it for you. We just want you to enjoy yourself. Bob catches a glimpse of somebody is carrying glasses back to the back. He's the bar back. He catches a glimpse. It's John Lord. John Lord is the bar back at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. So Bob's just blown away with all these people. He's curious. He goes upstairs. First person he sees up there in the DJ booth is Ton Mastery from the great radio station KNAC, radio personality Ton Mastery. She's spinning all the songs Bob wants to hear. Now, there's a dance floor and there's a house band that's set up. The house band consists of Dan McCaffrey and Manny Charlton from Nazareth and the Sweet Guys. So they're a super group assembled. They're gonna play all the Sweet songs. They're gonna do Desolation Boulevard and Give Me a Wink, Expect No Mercy, Hair of the Dog, anything that Bob wants to hear, it's his request. He can pick all the songs and they'll play it for him. Now, at the tippy top of the Rainbow, there's a kind of a special section. There's two people waiting up there. They want to make sure that everything goes smoothly for Bob, that the party's going off perfectly. And it is. We got David Bowie and Freddie Mercury of Queen. Now, Bob's wondering, God, I've seen all these people. Where is Lemmy? Well, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to Lemmy in a moment. So just as much as Bob loved to hang out, he loved to see great shows. And there's some great venues. So the first venue that Bob goes to is the Roxy, right next door to the Rainbow. And a great band is assembled just for Bob. We got Leonard Hayes, Joey Alves, Phil Kennemore from Y&T, Guy Speranza, and Mark Reel from Riot. We got some special guests that have rolled in. Rhett Forrester from Riot comes down. Gary Driscoll and Craig Gruber from Rainbow and Elf. And they're going to do an encore. Now, Ronnie James Dio hears his bandmates are playing. He runs on over from the Rainbow, jumps on stage, and they do an encore of Man on the Silver Mountain, because Bob is the man tonight. He is the man on the Silver Mountain. So Bob wanders out of the Roxy, goes to the next venue, and that's the Viper Room. And we've got a great band assembled for him there too. We got Paul Bailoff from Exodus, Jeff Hanneman from Slayer, Piggy from Voivod, Pete Steele from Carnivore and Typo Negative, and Vinny and Dime from Pantera. They're the band. They're going to run through their catalog of hits. Bob gets to pick the set list for that too. Some special guests roll in. We got a couple people that have rolled in. First person, Eric Wagner from Trouble. The next person is Martin Eric from Celtic Frost. And Mike Siskea from Rigor Mortis and Ministry. And Armando Acosta, drummer for St. Vitus. So they do a set of thrash and doom and just, it's an amazing set. Amazing set. And Bob's picking out songs that they did. Fantastic. Bob is like, how can this get any better? So Bob goes to the next venue, and that's the Whiskey A Go-Go. He walks up, sees on the marquee, Motorhead. Wow. So Bob goes in there. He sees Lemmy, Phil Taylor, and Vassity Clark. They're on stage. Lemmy comes up to the mic. Bob, we've been waiting for you. We're going to do a classic set of Motorhead just for you. So they rip through all classic Motorhead just for Bob. And Bob is amazed. Well, there's some special guests that have shown up. We've got Kelly Johnson from Girl School, Paul Sampson and Nikki Moore from Samson, Stephen Clark from Def Leppard, Burke Shelley from Budgie, and Wurzel shows up. So these guys, they come and play a special new wave of British heavy metal set just for Bob. And Bob's able to pick out those songs in the set list, all requests, all by Bob. Wow, amazing. So another special guest shows up, a very, very special guest shows up. She hops on stage. It's Wendy O. Williams of the Plasmatics. So, and Motorhead is a backing band. So they rip through all Plasmatic songs and all Motorhead songs, and that's the encore. So that's Bob's wish. He wanted to see all these great people once he got into heaven, and he saw them all. Amazing, amazing, quite an amazing night. First day in heaven. And you know, when he got to heaven, his friends and his family members were there with him, and they were coming along with him, enjoying these great times that Bob was experiencing up in heaven. And that's the way Bob was in real life. He took you along wherever you wanted to go. There's a motorcycle out there. Yeah, that's Bob riding out there. Wherever you wanted to go, that's where Bob took you. So he took you along for the ride, and that's just the way Bob was in real life. And he's here in spirit, and all the people I mentioned, they're here with us in spirit, because that's how it works. So just want to thank Bob for his friendship with all of us, and just being a great person and a unique person. So rest in peace, Bob Nalbandian, and take care.
Yeah, it was we went to different high schools, and and I was discovering this music kind of on my own. I didn't really have any friends. I had some pen pals, but I didn't have any friends in LA that knew anything about this music. And another friend of mine said, "Hey, there's this guy at Marina High School. I went to Ocean View High School. Said he's into the same band you're into." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." And I was saying, "No," and then he's, "No, he talks about those same bands." And so then he introduced me to him, and we had so much in common. It was amazing, because, and I think he was as amazed as I was, because he was going through the same thing at his high school. But I remember the day he came over, and we couldn't believe how much we had in common. And I was kind of narrow minded about the stuff I liked, but he knew so much. He was like an encyclopedia of hard rock and metal and everything. So and he was just like how you knew him, just the nicest kid, didn't say anything bad about anybody, and my mom loved him, and he didn't change at all through the years. He was a kind of a shy younger kid, and he wasn't so much when he got older, but you know, I went to a lot of early shows and used to go record collecting to get record hunting together, and um, you know, early Orange County shows we'd go to. We'd go to shows in Hollywood, the bigger shows at the country club. It's all metal stuff. That's all it was. And we'd ride together a lot. Yeah. And we never suspected those bands would get big, like Iron Maiden. And we'd discover them, and there are these little tiny bands back then. And never dreamt they would get big. Kind of like the Metallica thing. We never thought they'd be anything like they are. I thought maybe they'd get to be like Riot or like some of the bigger American bands, but nothing like they did. But yeah, that was a fun thing. And so many bands that we love too never got big, and should have, and we always wanted them to. And that was kind of always Bob's thing. He never was about the business, but he was always about promoting bands and trying to help the bands that he loved. And he never once talked about, I can make this kind of money or anything. He was just about, helping these bands succeed. And he loved seeing them get big and be successful. And That's what he always talked about. It was never ever about money, which is how he always was. Even toward the end, he was that same way. And then there was some LA bands that we liked a little bit more, and like Malice, and of course Armored Saint. We saw Slayer, but when they were a cover band, we'd go see them. They weren't playing speed metal at all, and using Metallica as their intro tape actually was like between bands, they'd be playing No Life Till Leather demo, but they weren't playing speed metal yet. They were playing Priest covers, and Brian Slagel would be at those shows too. And
My recollection is, and like you said, it's been a long time. I think I first met Bob at an Armored Saint show because he was tight with those guys, and he was Orange County, and I was far away from that. I had gone to shows in Orange County, but not a whole lot. So there's a whole different scene happening out there. So I'm pretty sure the first time I met him was when Armored Saint, probably the first time I saw Armored Saint. And then, we started talking, and again, here's another guy that, loved all the same music that you loved, all the European bands and the newer heavy metal. And it was always, whenever you met those people, especially way back then, you're instantly connected. You're instantly friends because you're into the same music, and there weren't a whole lot of people that are into it. And, Bob was just as into it as I was or anybody else was. So it's always fun to find those, kindred spirits, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think, maybe it's just me too, but I wasn't thinking far enough ahead for it to lead to anything. Like Bob tried putting out the Headbanger and those other, of course, the other fanzines around the world. But I don't know. And, he started managing some bands, and he had such a good way of meeting people, and everybody liked him, and you couldn't not trust Bob. He was just that kind of a guy. But, I didn't foresee anything in the future at all for any of it. I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't in my mindset. But he wasn't that way either. He wasn't real success oriented. I guess that's a way to put it. And he just loved the music and loved helping people, and just combine, like, people would meet through him and become friends. And this is the way he was. Yeah, there was a couple other fanzines before that in LA, but I can really think of one before that, and that was Brian Slagel's New Heavy Metal Review. But it was kind of the first, like, do-it-yourself fanzine, that kind of the metal mania of LA, kind of, and it, where like Ron Quintana, directed it, towards worldwide metal, but he also addressed a lot of the San Francisco bands, and that's what Bob did too, and he was helping. He was, really good friends with the Armored Saint guys and the Slayer guys, and a band, August Red Moon, he was really good friends with, and he knew all those guys, Malice. He was friends with everybody, so he helped them all in the early days. Helped promote them, and of course Metallica, but and it just never stopped. He never stopped doing it.
Yeah, Bob was one of the most passionate people about heavy metal that I ever met. Like, he was all about the music. His whole life was about, how can I promote the music? What can I do to help it? What outlets can I do? And he's done, so many different things, but he's always been about the music. And, every time I'd see him, we talk about, whatever the new releases were, or, what are you listening to? Or, all that sort of stuff. And it never changed the entire 40 some odd years I've known him. He literally didn't change as a person. He was the same guy that he was when he was 20 something in his 40s, and still loved the music and still was passionate about it. And every time I saw him, he's wearing a band t-shirt and the whole thing. So he was a real genuine guy, number one. And number two, obviously a huge metal fan, and was in it for all the right reasons, and an OG guy from day one, pretty much. So I had a mad amount of respect for Bob, because you see people over the years and they kind of come and go, and especially if they're not in a band or whatever. And he was always a consistent presence on the LA metal scene and just the metal scene in general.
Hi, this is Betsy Bitch from the band Bitch, and Scandal West, drummer, also
Hello.
from the band Bitch. Hi. And we're here on this somber occasion to pay tribute to an absolute gem of a human being who I just can't say enough great things about as a person, and above and beyond that, just a legendary producer, director, journalist, hard rock metal historian, great supporter of the scene of that genre of music. I was blessed enough to be interviewed by him and hooked up by him for the Inside LA Metal documentary. And I was just thrilled to be included in that, and I got to work very closely with him. And it was very shocking and sudden of his passing, and we're all grieving his loss, and we're going to miss him greatly. I just can't say enough good things about him, and I know a lot of other people share the same sentiment. It's like Randy.
He did a lot in the rock and metal scene, but as a person, he was just a really sweet, wonderful guy. He was a great friend. He always had your back. He looked out for his friends and took care of them and always helped you if you possibly could. He was a great guy, and it's horrible to lose him. I guess that's all I have to say, but God bless Bob, and he was wonderful.
Yeah, we're both blessed to have known him and been associated with him and been his friend. So rest in peace, Bob. We love you.
If I recall correctly, it had to be the country club. We played the country club a lot, and Bob, I guess the first time he saw us, he just kept following us. I mean, he kept up with us, and after a while, you start seeing the same guy, and you go like, hey, I'm Bob, hey, what's up, Bob, and after that, it was like, before you knew it, we were always inviting him backstage to hang out with us. And, and I think he had a rag at that point in the magazine, doing his thing. I think he put us in the magazine, cause he really dug what we were doing, and of course we were different, but he stuck to it like glue. He just like a shoot right to it, not even a head trip at all. You know what I mean? Because during those days, I mean, when we came out, we had to push through a little bit, because people were like, "Oh my God, they're all black, and they're playing heavy metal, hard rock, Bob was just like, chink, straight to the point. Yeah, what's up? That was it.
I knew you were going to ask that, and I was breaking my brains over when did I meet Bob, and I don't know. It's because Bob has become such a part of my life that it seems like he's been part of this life all this time, right? So honestly, I don't know when I remember. As long as I remember, I've known Bob. But let's put it this way, And obviously we met over music. That was, the hard rock, heavy metal was his passion, was his life. And that's how I entered, through Metal Rendezvous, through Headbanger. And it's one of the things that always strikes me about when I think about Bob and how we met and how we started to become friends and really got close is something that was mentioned a lot in the Bay Area Godfathers documentary. If you remember, many of them said, hey, we weren't rivals up in we were all friends, we're all helping each other. And Bob and I were kind of in that same relationship, even though he was down in LA and I was up in Monterey at the time. We just supported each other. We helped each other with Headbanger and then with Metal Rendezvous, and it just grew. We grew closer, and that just became real close friends.
Bob, like I said, at first he had a magazine, but he was always connected to other people. And he was always turning on other people to us. Metal Blade got turned on, I think, through us or John, but Sutherland. But yeah. Those guys, Bob was always talking us up, always showing up to every show, that kind of thing. And whatever he could do, Bob would do, it's just simple as that. And,
And it's funny because as close as our friendship is and was, we've never lived in the same place together. He always been in LA, then he went up to North California, and eventually when he ended up in San Jose, I was already here in Texas. So we never, ever lived in the same town or even as close proximity together. And yet our friendship endured. And it's because of what we built back in the day when he had Headbanger, or I had a Metal Rendezvous. And then, when he closed Headbanger, he moved over to become an integral part of Metal Rendezvous as we grew it from the fanzine to the full-blown magazine later on. He was always there, always available, always willing to help. And that just stays with you for the rest of your life.
Well, I mean, like I said, his loyalty was the biggest focus. He really didn't have that kind of power to place us somewhere, what I mean? But it was just his, he always wrote about us if he had a chance, and he always came to every gig. That was that kind of thing you don't really see too much, when that kind of loyalty, and every time you see him or run across him, it's always the same vibe, He was like, "Oh, Bernie," and they say, "Hey," he put together that metal series, the Inside Metal. So he put us in there prominently, right? So he was like, you guys, I don't know if you guys, inside the film, he was saying, I don't know if you guys were around during that time, but there was a band called Sound Barrier, Space, which gave us, in his documentary, which gave us, I'm sure a lot of people saw that. Some people call me up and say, "Man, I just saw this documentary," and I say, "Oh yeah, that's Bob Nalbandian, that's what he does. He and Carl Alvarez." So yeah, they pushed us like, whatever they could do. And that was a big one because, he's asked us, could we be in there and use music? I said, "Oh, sure, for sure, to complete that documentary," because, there were several other offers for us because there was not a band like us during that period for us to do, documentaries or be a part of a box set, that kind of thing. So sometimes he would call on that, and if he had information, got wind of something, and then we'd have to decide if we wanted to be involved. But yeah, we would be the band that, Bob would always push,
Nah, he always did it for the love of music, and all the steps that he's done since, whether it's joining Roadrunner, the record label, or becoming a contributor to some other magazine. He didn't do it for the money or the fame. He wanted to get as close as possible to the music. That was his ultimate motive. And the friends that he made throughout all these steps in his journey, he also was loyal to them. I mean, that's the one thing that I need to add. You said he was loyal to the music, but he was also loyal to the friends. I mean, when I exited the music industry in the mid-90s, a lot of my so-called friends I never heard from again, right? Bob, no way. We stayed in touch. I moved across the country to St. Louis. He stayed in LA, but we stayed in touch. He came to my wedding in 2000, and we saw each other. Any of my journeys, whether it was for work or vacation, when I was in a neighborhood, and sometimes the neighborhood was 100 miles away, but we always made a point to get together throughout all these years and just talk about the music, talk about the passion that we both had for the genre. But it's that friendship that really endured. Whether it's the music that held us together or his personality, well, I would argue it's both, right? You need to have both that really kept us and kept this friendship alive all these years.
Yeah, you never know how it goes, through word of mouth and stuff, because Bob was like that kind of guy, always spreading us. Because, I mean, I still get hit on YouTube, channel from Brazil or something, and some 25-year-old guy told me that he got turned on to Sound Barrier from his dad. And I'm like, cool. And it's like, yeah, we were just watching it on the YouTube. And I said, who is that? And you never know because Bob had his hands everywhere. He was always into stuff. So I even he hooked me up with a Swedish guitar player a couple of years after Sound Barrier. I forget his name now, but he hooked me up with him, and we cranked out about 6 songs or so, and Bob was carrying that around, showing that to different people, and it was just like on a 4-track, just demo, I mean, real demo stuff, and it was just, but we started cranking out some nice songs, and that was over at Bob's house here in North Hollywood. He said, hey, I want you to meet this dude, and then he knew me. Hadn't heard of him, but then Bob turned me on to his history, and we started cranking out a couple of songs. So that's how Bob works.
Hello, my name is Byron Hauntus, and I was a publicist from 1984 at Elektra Records, then Capitol Records, and Union Entertainment Group until 2006. Bob, you knew my bands better than I did. And when I had someone new to work with, you had already knew who they were and what they were all about. You were like a friend of everybody, even when you were interviewing the bands, and they loved you. Your integrity spoke volumes, and when we were out at shows, etc., outside of our rooms and our offices, it was like a fraternity group / sorority group get together. What a great time to be in the music business, especially the metal and hard rock side of things. Anyhow, Bob, rest in peace, my friend. And please, say hello to all those characters we know upstairs. Oh, check this out, some cool filming. Bob, you're missed. You're probably having a better time up there than we are down here. All the best. Rest in peace, my friend.
Absolutely, Bob was not one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the most positive people I've ever been around. He always had a smile on his face. He was such a, like a booster, like pro music, pro heavy metal. I mean, forever, ever since I've known him. And he always had that twinkle in his eye and a smile on his face. And he'd always just be happy. Like, tell us what's going on. Tell us this, tell us that. And I did a number of podcasts and stuff with him. And he was always great.
One place I can tell you absolutely for certain where I did not meet Bob for the very first time, and very few people can say that, and that would be at the very first Metallica show.
Okay.
Bob was there. Bob was in there recording. So there is that. So no one can say I was there when I was there from the beginning. It's like very few people. There's a small list, a very, very small list, and only Bob can say he's on that list. But my history with Bob kind of falls in that same spectrum of, all the different shows and concerts that I would attend. I would see Bob, but I'm gonna have to say potentially, and it makes sense because it just becomes very cyclical with one band, and that would be Armored Saint.
Okay.
Armored Saint did a lot of shows like the Troubadour, just around and whiskey and whatnot. But I want to say a country club in Reseda, California. But I want to say it was a Troubadour, 92 or 93, and I believe he was at the in-store for Blue Meanie Records in Woodland Hills, and that was probably the first time I met him. This was or the very early stages as he was starting the Headbanger fanzine, because meeting him in person was at one of those places. And then I know that we eventually were tape traders, pen pals and all that, but we lived in different area codes. But for the most part, I would say Armored Saint 82 or 83. It's fuzzy, but that's what I can pinpoint.
Everyone that was in at the beginning, whether it was people starting fanzines in the States, like Bob Muldowney on the East Coast, people doing fanzines and Krang and all that in the UK, Metal Mike and Andre doing the thing with Aardschok in Holland, the guys doing this in Germany. I mean, forget about it. But everyone had a part to play. Everyone was, the reason why this music took off and got popular, and they shouted it from the hilltops,
But Bob was crucial. He just was. He had the ability to network. He had the ability to if I said talk about music, but really get into the nuts and bolts of why this song is important, why this band will do something. He did a lot of forecasting, because being early on, supporters of underground music and all the artists that have come from that, he had the voice, and that was something that a lot of people did not take the time to do. I mean, this is a lot of legwork, a lot of burning calories to get to shows. Whether you drive, you're taking the bus, or you're getting dropped, all that. It's a lot of work, because you're going to the show, you're there for hours on end. You talk to the band, you're hanging out after the show, you're exchanging numbers, you're exchanging all this information, and then all that knowledge Bob accumulated. Of course, it resulted in him doing the Headbanger fanzine. He also championed a band called Eden. He went, to give you a basketball analogy, he really did a full court press and then getting them signed. For those that may not know, Eden were a band put out a release in 1986, and they came out of the ashes of a band called August Red Moon, based in Orange County, who he also championed very well. So he again just really wanted to highlight bands that weren't going to get the time of day from the circus and the hit paraders at the time. Everything was relegated. Really, seriously, it's easy for anyone to just click on YouTube and just sort of see what the new single or the new band is out there. But we really had to struggle to find this information. That's why the pen pals, the fanzines, that's what kept that's what kept things going. And Bob was he was at the forefront of that, and it really helped immensely to so many bands, especially for the exposure.
I'm not sure with that, but I definitely remember Bob, like in the 2000s when we started, after Mark got over his accident, we started touring again. And he'd always come up and want to do an interview and what you guys doing, and I love this and blah, blah, blah. He was just, like I said, just full of positive energy, and always had a laugh and a smile on his face,
But Bob was nonstop. Even when the Headbanger stopped after, I think, a dozen or so plus issues, he kept going. It was continuous. All the legacy bands, he still would talk about their new releases or the new tour, because he had a voice, and he had a passionate voice where he could meticulously talk about the songs, lyrics, the artwork. Bob was he was rare person in terms of what he could do by just his words. So
just man, I couldn't have gotten there at a better time, and of course Dave, right, is just kicking around the idea for his next band post Metallica. Me and my friend Greg Handovit, joined forces with him. We through the early, Dave was writing stuff, but during the rehearsals, and then we decided to call the band Megadeth. That was the impetus of forming our band. So, a lot of excitement around Dave, what his next step was going to be, and Bob being one of those excitable forces. We all know Bob, always happy, always excited, always positive. So me and Dave, we go down to meet Bob. I seem to think it was Redondo Beach. We literally go do the interview with Bob on the beach. I was like suntanning out on the beach, and which is what was so memorable about it. It's like, I'll always remember Bob. He's like, it was very bizarre to do a freaking heavy metal magazine interview on the beach in California. Shouldn't it be dark and satanic? No, it's sunny. So there we are. And so Bob, of course, Bob in Southern Cal, Ron Quintana up in the Bay Area. So all these people, East Coast, West Coast, Bernard Doe from Metal Forces was in the UK, and, Lars, and I think because he was from Denmark, he understood the international connection that needed to happen. You know, Dave told me that Lars's, you know, first kind of mantra or mindset with Metallica was to be the U.S. Motorhead, right? I think that was kind of the original dream for him, right? So, you know, he understood that, you know, you had to get your music out to these people. So the Bob Nalbandians of the world, and in particular Bob, you know, they knew that when you got a demo, the No Life Till Leather demo from Metallica being sort of the crown jewel of success, you know, you get those demos out, the buzz spreads. You know, today, if you did that, you're basically giving your songs away on the internet, right? You'll never get them back. But back in those days, you wanted people to spread the demo around because it's how Bob and Ron and Bernardo and all these guys and Malcolm Dome, who was writing for Kerrang and various things, you know, you wanted that buzz because that's what got the likes of Megaforce and Combat Records interested in your band. It was sort of early A&R PR, you know.
We had many things in common. His passion was my passion. And for me to be part of some of his final work, that meant everything to me, because with rock and heavy metal, that's the one area that I will always be passionate about. And he wanted me to share that in his docs, and that I will always be appreciative of.
You always let Bob in the room, you know what I mean? Because he was genuine, he was heartfelt, and maybe it's because he's from Orange County, and you know, he wasn't part of the hustle of the Sunset Strip, you know, because when you live there, and I had to learn how to do it too. You got to learn how to hustle and bullshit and get your way in the room. And you know what I mean? It's that thing. And I think Bob, not being from that culture, but truly being, you know, a fan who, like all of us, bought your Iron Maiden records or whatever it is, you took them home, you listened to them on your stereo, and you just became a fan. I mean, he was that guy. And I think that's why everybody liked him. Of course, you know, Brian Slagel from Metal Blade Records, you know, he was another one of the guys, not a journalist, but a label guy. Johnny Z, you know, on the East Coast, you know, so there's all these players in the scene of that helped this thing get off the ground and become what it was. And it was all fan driven. It wasn't money driven. It wasn't profit motive. It was just for the love of the scene and to be part of something. And I think that's why when we did the Big Four, you know, back in, you know, 2010 and 2011, that's why it was even so special, is because this was a family reunion, not just of the four bands, but of everybody that was a part of it. You know, such a celebration. So, you know, I think with Bob, look, we interviewed him for the Nick Menza movie that will hopefully we'll get that out next year. That was the last time I saw Bob, and that would have been January. It was a year ago, January of 2022, when we were filming the interviews, and he gave us some great stories. And you know, he is as happy-go-lucky as Bob is. When he spoke with authority because he was there. He knew what he was talking about. Because again, I saw him in January. We filmed his segment. We actually got in the car, drove down the street to Starbucks. We got caught up. We were bullshitting and just hanging out. He, you know, and he was so positive to me. He was like, man, he goes, you just keep going. Everything you're doing is just great, man. You're on point. Just keep at it. You're, you know, everything that you're doing with the Lucid, the movie, and all this other stuff. So he was so encouraging to me in this next season of my life to just keep going, man. Just stay the course and genuine, not like trying to just, you know, fluff me up, but like really genuine, like, dude, you're on it, you know, keep going, you know? So, and that to me was, you know, real friendship, you know, not just as a, you know, as a former Megadeth guy, but just as me, you know, Bob and David, you know, so that's the genuineness that from him.
Hi there, my name is Joel McIver, and I'm very happy to contribute to this tribute to Bob Nalbandian, or as he will always be in my mind, the great mad dog Nalbandian. And anybody who knew Bob will know how funny that nickname is. I'll take credit for inventing it, just for a joke, I think, about 10 years ago. I started referring to Bob as Mad Dog in my emails to him, just because he was such a gentle kind of guy, and because he was quite smiley and soft-spoken and just very friendly, kind of huggy dude, very, very affectionate, the least like a mad dog you could imagine. So it was just a hilarious nickname that fortunately he liked, because it stuck, everyone started calling him that. And he used to sign off his emails as Mad Dog Nalbandian, which, again, if you knew him, is the funniest thing ever, because he was just such a sweetheart. Anyway, I've known Bob about 20 years. I think I met him in the early 2000s because I was writing a book about Metallica in which he was involved. Gave me a lot of really useful information about the early days of the band and his role with bringing them to light, which absolutely should be stressed and celebrated, along with so many other great bands in whose history he played a part. And he and I, after a while, we developed a friendship that was based on very good-natured kind of ball busting. He would always say, what's this shit music you're listening to today, Joel? Because I used to like a lot of death metal that he hated and didn't really understand. And in return, I would say, oh yeah, you're listening to Ted Nugent and Aerosmith, right? The heaviest band on the planet. And we would sort of exchange jokes by email. And we first met in, I think, 2008 at the NAMM show in Anaheim, California, where we hung out. I had been sent over by the magazine that I was editing at the time, which was Bass Player magazine in the end. And they had put me in like a motel in Anaheim. Bob said, would it be okay to come and stay? Because I had like a suite of rooms. And of course I said, yeah, it'll be great. We went and had some beers. And Bob, to my surprise, Bob brought back a stripper with him. A very pretty young lady. To stay with him. I think actually it was not a romantic relationship. I think they were friends. But of course that led to huge ball busting in the years to come, right? The time that I invited Bob to come and stay in my hotel room, and what the hell, he brought a stripper along, which was always really funny. And so, I connected with Bob over the years. I'm in England. He's in California, so it didn't happen very often. It was always at the NAMM show, though, and we had some great times, man. He was the sweetest man in the world, as I'm sure everybody who's also taking part in this program will tell you. So thank you very much, guys, for paying tribute to him. He was one of a kind. I'm so sorry he's gone. 59 is no age for someone with as much lust for life as he had. I'll always remember Bob, and I hope you do too. Thanks very much.
I had the pleasure of meeting Bob once in real life. I don't get out traveling too far away. I'm from Toronto, but we had a family trip to California, and Bob met me with a great hug and took me on a nice tour of Los Angeles, took me to Amoeba, took me to the Rainbow Room. It was great. But yeah, had known Bob for a long time before that, been on the podcast a bunch of times, interviewed him. He's in a few of my books here and there because he had just such a great knowledge base and all those contacts and all those great stories about being on the ground floor and helping all those bands get off the ground, the whole Metal Blade situation, Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, all those guys. So yeah, he was instrumental along with a bunch of you guys in the press, the various forms of press over there. But yeah, Bob was a great guy, great enthusiasm. As we said in our little private email group, one of the funniest things was watching his defense of Nazareth and Bachman Turner Overdrive all the time. That was really cool. But yeah, he'd it was California time, so we'd all be grousing and arguing like a bunch of old ladies all day, and then Bob would chime in with a nice long email down the road later when he got up and going, and he always sent in really good defenses of stuff with a lot of caps and a lot of exclamation points and good arguments about things. But yeah, it was great being on his show. He had such a great radio voice. He was just put everybody at ease. He was really good that way, and you can tell. There was a lot. There's obviously we've seen there's been a lot of love for him. We all did our tributes on Facebook to him, and they got tons and tons of comments and likes and all that stuff. Hundreds of reactions. So yeah, you could tell that he was a really important guy in the industry, and I kind of knew about the cancer on and off, and I didn't really, he kept that pretty private to himself, obviously. But yeah, periodically we were on his shows, and like I say, interviewed him a bunch of times. I think we interviewed him for Banger Films as well, Metal Evolution. I'm not sure if he's actually in any of those episodes, but I remember we at least interviewed him for research and stuff like that. And obviously he was a great filmmaker on his own and got all that stuff done, which is going to serve as great history for anybody. I see it on Tubi all the time there, his stuff. But yeah, there you go. Thanks again for asking me to be part of this tribute to Bob. Lots of love. We all loved him. And yeah, rest in peace, Bob Nalbandian.
Here at the Soho House.
Curtis, you made his face in Los Angeles, West Hollywood, for the, I guess, the press version of our
press premiere.
Yeah, went well. We're looking forward to Thursday night as well up here in Hollywood.
We feel like high class, big time rollers here.
We'll see you soon.
Really, I met Bob when we. It was at my birthday party that my friend AC threw, and so I was starting to work on a documentary that my producing partner Warren had said, you should do a documentary about the LA rock scene back in the day. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. And I really didn't have a plan for it. I had a camera and that was it. So AC said, hey, Bob does journalism and stuff. He's deep in the scene, loves it. So you should talk to him. And so I went over and met Bob and said, hey, what do you think about doing a documentary? And he was on board right away. So, we connected, and that was where our journey began.
Well, I remember it really well because I came here from Sweden on November 18th in 1992. I flew in, and I met him New Year's that year at a party that him and his roommates had thrown up at Mulholland Terrace, which is where he lived at the time. So that was my first exposure to him at his party. So and he was Bob, he was a fun dude. And then obviously our friendship deepened over the next year or so, actually over the next 2 years. But that was my first exposure, and it was a great party, I tell you.
Oh God, yeah, Bob was totally invaluable. I mean, I guess it was serendipity that we met, because if I would have tried to pull it off without Bob as an ally, it never would have happened. So it was definitely meant to be. And he took the reins. He grabbed the bull by the horns. Really, it became his documentary, honestly. And he just went to work, rounded up all the interviews. We did a lot of them right here at my house out on the back deck. And it was great because I knew a lot of the people, of course, some peripherally and some as friends. And so it was a great opportunity to reconnect. And it just turned into an adventure. It had definitely had its challenges. I'll say that. It's not an easy thing. For every hour, documentary, it's 100 hours of footage that has to be sorted, edited, and he just had the right mindset to dive in, organize it, look at creating the overall start to finish and visualize it. So yeah, Bob was just awesome, amazing.
It was super important because I was very Swedish when I first came here. First of all, my English wasn't all that good, but then I was kind of quiet, you know. Generally, Swedes are quiet if they don't know people, and then they get super loud when they get drunk. But he was just so gregarious and outgoing, and I think a lot of that rubbed off on me. So I think to a certain degree, he's the guy that turned me into who I am today, in the sense that I say hi to everyone I meet, you know, and I give everyone a chance, which he did. He didn't care if you were young or old, like whatever sex, whatever race, whatever. He was always open to give everyone a chance to come in and become part of the group, and that's what I try to pattern myself after.
You know, as I came to know Bob, and we hung out together and went on these adventures, and yeah, that's it. He was just such a soulful guy, and he had great trust between us, and you know, I knew I could count on him to stick it out, and he wasn't flaky at all. You know, he was just a really cool and passionate human that I fell in love with. Honest, you know, he very inspired me to carry it through and do our work, and that's how we became friends. And then we started, you know, just hanging more and drinking beers together, and Toby, you know, was sort of a friend too, and we'd hang out with him, and then we brought Carl into the mix and traveled up to the Bay Area to interview Metallica, and we went to Vegas, and so we had a lot of fun adventures together and became, you know, good buds.
He was like the spider in the web, in the sense that he connected everyone, but then he also got connected to friends of his friends. So his web just got bigger and bigger. But I got to tell you another thing about him. I've never met anyone who's been so good at maintaining friendships. Because every time he would always, you know, so we live in the South Bay of LA. He had a key to the house. So even if we were out of town and he was in town, he would always come and stay here. And he would always, every time he was here, he would make an effort to go out and to see all his buddies in the area. And he didn't care how far he had to drive. He would go down to Lake Elsinore and all over the place just to see his buddies. But he really maintained friendships in a way I only wish I could. And also, he never really judged anyone. And I know that's like the thing to say, like you shouldn't judge others, but it's very easy to judge people, right? You judge their actions or whatever. He never judged anyone. He was wide open to become friends with anyone. And I think that's who he really was. And couldn't care less about money. He just needed enough money to get by, right? Put food on the table, gas money, and to pay the rent. And he never really cared for accolades. That's why it's kind of fun that at least, you know, over the last 15 years, he started getting some real accolades outside the absolute center of the metal community when he started making the documentaries. At least he got more exposure, which he really deserved. But again, it was something that it's neither here nor there for him. He did what he did because he did it. He didn't have any other preconceived plans or anything.
No, the original plan, I think, was just the one, you know, and see how that goes. We weren't quite that ambitious to think we could do that, you know, a whole series. But the first one had so much material, so much footage that it grew. And then it was like, okay, this has to be 2 episodes. It's just too much. And, you know, again, kudos to Bob for doing that. Especially the editing part is so tedious and really requires incredible dedication, and he had it. Absolutely amazing.
But on the other hand, it also feels a little bit like all these people that were part of his inner circle, which is kind of a big inner circle, it's a little bit of a family. I talked to a bunch of the other guys, and it's like it's almost like we feel that all of us have been vetted, right, by him. We all know that we're all good people, we're okay people, so our friendships will continue. But he was definitely the hub right there. He was the one that brought everyone together.
we can discuss the next scene, right? Okay.
So what are we working on now?
We're doing the kind of the metal and the record store section here.
Okay.
Yeah. So are we good to go to record?
Yes.
All right. The rise of metal gave birth to many European magazines. This inspired the launch of two highly influential Bay Area fanzines, Metal Mania and Metal Rendezvous. What do you think? Does that kind of sound good?
Perfect,
Awesome. Yeah.
They were the two major players. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. And I think we need to talk about the guitar players next. That'll be a good one as well.
Well, we should also add in the section about the record stores and, of course, KUSF.
We need to do that. Yeah. Let's add that right now.
We'll put that all together into one section.
In addition, college station KUSF's Rampage Radio, which was led by Ian Kellen and Ron Quintana, were also very influential in supporting the local scene. Is that good?
Yeah.
Kind of like that?
Well, on the record stores and with this.
And finally, now let's take that from the top.
Ready, Matt?
Finally, there were the record stores like Bill Burkhart's Record Exchange and the Record Vault, which made all the imports available. I'm not particularly happy with it. I think we may have to rewrite some of the verbiage and finish it off.
Well, I want to talk about the import, obviously the imports that come over for the European imports, and then talk about the local demos that they used to sell.
Yeah.
Of the, Metallica, No Left to Leather, and all that. So we'll come back and rewrite that part.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, to add to that, and his desire to stay in touch with people is when I left the music industry and we did stay in touch, he knew that I was still a fan. I always been a fan, right? So he always kept pulling me into little things, right? Hey, do you want to do a little review for Shockwaves, or hey, do you want to do a school sessions with me about concerts? Or he always kept doing that, knowing that I was passionate and it would make me happy. And that's what he wanted, really. He wanted me to be happy. And then when he asked me to contribute as much as I did to the Bay Area Godfathers, it was a dream come true for me that, he really wanted to be part of it. And I just felt so special and for what he did and by bringing me in so closely to that. Yeah.
Releasing boxes and stuff, right? Yeah, it's fun. Just get it out there, Oh, is this filming now? Yeah, it's live.
Yeah, you're live.
Oh, we're live. Wow, look at that, Danny. Danny Shipman.
Trying to get your
Live
CD
on
products in there.
Shockwave School Sessions, episode number 30. Yeah. Right. Oh, well, on my 30th anniversary of living in San Francisco. Oh, perfect. There you go. Nice. Awesome. See, we tied it in perfectly. That was planned, by the way.
Hi, this is Danny Shipman from Reality Check TV in San Francisco. I worked on the documentary films Bay Area Godfathers and Band vs. Brand with Bob. And Bob was a huge inspiration on me even before I even met him. I used to read his fanzine, The Headbanger, as a teenager, and it turned me on to so many amazing bands, this treasure trove of this wonderful underground scene that I didn't know about, where I discovered bands like Bitch and Armored Saint and Hellion and Malice and more. It was just amazing what he did and what he exposed me to and exposed other people to. And his Inside Metal series is the perfect education to really learn about what the metal scene was about, not just the big bands you know about, but a lot of these forgotten bands that help shape and form and bring metal to what it is as you know it. And his passing away has just robbed us of so many amazing stories and so much more that could be done. Now, there's a thing that happens once a year, usually in the LA area, and it's also been done at the Wacken Festival, the Metal Hall of Fame. Now, the Metal Hall of Fame is not exclusive to just rock stars. The Metal Hall of Fame also gives recognition to those that have helped shape and form and contributed so well to the heavy metal scene. And if anybody deserves to be in the Metal Hall of Fame, it's Bob Nalbandian. So I vote we put Bob Nalbandian in the Hall of Fame and honor him for all that he's done for the heavy metal community and the heavy metal scene. Thank you.
So there's nothing I can say bad about him. I mean, I love the guy like a brother, and he's, always such a loyal guy and, truthful and, sometimes I'd ask him for advice on things, and you always walked away feeling better after you talked to him, and even with what he was going through, and he would help me with my problems. It's like I didn't have any problems compared to what he was going through, but that wasn't in his mindset to think that way. He just wanted to help a friend.
But
You know, I would urge everybody out there, particularly if you're new, maybe you jumped on the Skull Sessions maybe a year ago and don't know the backstory on Bob or whatever, is go back and listen to the early Skull Sessions. I think they started in 2006 or whatever. I went back and listened to them. I don't remember listening to the shows from 10 years ago, but you're getting re-educated again and listen to the best live albums of the 70s or the best live albums of the 80s, whatever. There's huge education in going back and listening to that. Put me onto a shit ton of music that I was aware of but not really in depth on. So I would urge everybody to do that. And just for me, he was just a great guy, and it was just an incredible shame what happened and how quickly it happened. I was glad I got to meet them and kept in contact with them. And I think the last text I had from Bob a couple of months ago was him busting my balls again, like literally busting my balls.
I'm just glad for the friendship I had with him. I'm just glad for everything he did for me. And when it comes to the podcasting and all that as well, I said it on my show. I wouldn't be doing Focus on Metal if he hadn't have, sown the seeds in my brain to go and do that. And in a lot of ways, it was the DIY aspect of it that he brought to me as well. That it was like, I can do this. I don't have to be on commercial radio to do it, or a local radio station. I can do it myself in my own house from the grassroots up, and do a show that a lot of people will like. And Bob was really good at doing that.
Yeah, I'm upset that I don't get to play our new album to him and get his reaction on that. So I guess I'll have to play it real loud for him to hear it now.
Bob, I think, he lived a great life. He was a man of integrity. He finished strong. Everybody, I'm sure every one of these podcasts or comments that I ever saw online, everybody just loves the guy, and what a great way to finish off your time on earth, of leaving that kind of a legacy behind, just being selfless and just always one to come and help and pitch in and just be part of the goodwill.
Well, I just want to say, Bob, love you, brother, and hope to see you on the other side. He's a beautiful human, and so grateful I got to know him.
I will miss my friend 40 years, and I want to again thank everyone who was always had something good to say about Bob, because I don't know of any bad. I don't.
Again, what a great guy Bob was, and what a lasting memory. He's left a legacy of, a guy that was an integral part of heavy metal worldwide. So tribute to him.
If we were together, we would always, do shots together, go to the restaurant and eat together, go around to the Roxy and get a pizza. I mean, it was like that, the Rainbow, we just sit up there and, just, if he's in there and I walk in there, he'd go, Bernie, come on over here. What, you want some pizza, man? Let's do a shot, and it's like always the same. That's the one thing, you can't say that about people. A lot of people always the same. So yeah, Bob was, if you know how certain people hit you in your mind and your heart, that's Bob.
But that's the thing with Bob. You were not a nobody. You were right up there with Lars. As far as his relationships and friendships are concerned, and that's what was so important about what made Bob so trying to find the right word. Special, yeah, special. There you go. Yeah.
You know what I would do? I would reinforce for him how many people he reached in his life, and how few people do that. There are very few people that reach as many people that he did. And the funny thing about him is that every friend he ever had always felt that he was his best buddy, right? Because he made everyone feel special. And I don't care about achievements so much, or money or status symbols. I really care about people that leave a lasting imprint by being who they are or who they were. And that's him. He left a lasting imprint by being the most genuine guy you could ever imagine. And on top of that, was being so much fun too. He wasn't just a somber dude that you sat down and talked to. He was a guy you can have fun with too. He was just an incredible person. And they don't make that many of those. So, yeah, he'll be forever missed.